way. I might say, nobody doing it better. Y'all some lightweights. Malik right, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Shout out Young Swish.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of State of the Jungle with Malik Wright, presented by the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-hosts. As always, we've got Evan, we've got Logan, we've got Daniel, we've got Jimmy on the 1 and 2s, and we have a jam-packed show. Before we jump into everything, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Boys, it's been an eventful week. We've had running backs, former running backs going at media, former media members of the Bengals. We've had former running backs going at coaches. We've had pickups of Marco Wilson of the New England Patriots. And we had the Bengals bye week. I mean, it was an interesting week. It was an interesting week. But one thing I got to say is I'm happy that for the rest of the coming weeks, it'll be Bengals football. Be nothing but Bengals football to talk about and get into. I also want to make sure that we wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving while we got you here as well. It was important for us to do a show today to bring everything to you guys. So we'll try our best to answer your questions, get into the conversation. Let's start with this. The Bengals are coming off of their bye week, which poses the question, what are our expectations the remainder of the season? Believe it or not, the boys could still get to double-digit wins. Will they? No idea. Daniel, what say you?
Yeah, I think that the expectations are there's a wide range of outcomes here. And that's the part that I'm just excited to see. I'm curious to see, because this really does feel like a turning point in this Bengals organization. It feels like a turning point in the trajectory of the Joe Burrow, regime in Cincinnati. For this entire crop that you looked at from the Super Bowl reign, it kind of seems like that crop kind of phased out. And this is a whole, you still got Joe Burrow, you got Jamar Chase, but the initial guys, whether it was the guys on the defensive line, it seems like they're trying to get in a new crop. And I think that the expectations are to win football games. The expectation is to be in the playoff.
That is the most political answer I've ever seen you give, ever. I mean, I'm like, genuinely, I love you. You're my best friend. We spent the entire day. We had a great day together. What the fuck are you talking about right now?
Well, I'm trying to get there.
He's practicing his coach speak. Bengals job might be open soon. Daniel wants to throw his head in the ring.
No, so I'm getting there. Their expectation is for them to be in the playoff race come week 17 and week 18. That's the expectation. If you are anything short of that, this is a failed season, and then we can start talking the drastic things. But there is, that's what the expectation has to be. While what is the trajectory of the season? The trajectory is saying you're going to have a top 10 pick. The trajectory is saying you are going to continue being bad. The trajectory is you are going to lose to the Steelers because they're a good football team. You're going to lose a close game. You're going to lose to the Denver Broncos because they're a playoff team. That's a trajectory. But the expectation can't be that. The expectation can't be what the first 11 weeks of the season was. The expectation has to be higher than that. And that's why I think that the expectation has to be you might have to win out. And that's the part that if we're talking playoffs, that's what the expectation is. What do I expect to happen? I think that they will be in the playoff race come week 16, week 17. I think that Broncos game is going to mean a lot. But I think that if I were to make a prediction right now, I think that the Bengals are going to be waiting and hoping for help from other teams come week 17, week 18. We talk about the Broncos right now, 2 games ahead, and they got 2 pretty decently easier games on the schedule, but they got a game against the Browns this week. They play a ton of man-to-man coverage against Bo Nix that could, cause a slip up. So I think that the Bengals expectations, I know went a little long-winded there, but is to win. I think you can't lose more than 1 football game. and you are going to be begging, you're going to be hoping that these other teams, like the Miami Dolphins looked very good last week. And while their record may not be great, they're still ahead of the Bengals right now. And there's a chance they're still in the playoff race. So I think you're going to be hoping week 17, week 18, that these other teams give you help. But I think that this upcoming week will say a lot about this team, because if they lose this week, I'd be ready to say that this season is a lost season. And then from there, if they lose against the Steelers this week, we can start talking about new head coach. We can start talking about this locker room turning to absolute hell. And that's kind of why I'm just waiting to see what happens this week, because this seems like this is a turning point in the Bengals season, mainly if they lose this game.
Yeah.
Logan?
I think my expectations for them is just simply do not continue to find ways to lose football games. That cannot be a trend that we continue to see after the bye week. We talked about it a little bit last week about how Zach Taylor has had success coming out of the bye week the last 4 years, really, for 3-1. That is something that needs to continue. When you have these positive trends, they need to continue. When we got so many things going negatively, so many negative trends, if you start to lose sight of those positive ones, things should be talked about. Things are going to get ugly quick. But again, at the end of the day, point blank period, you cannot continue to beat yourselves. You cannot continue to beat yourselves. The Bengals are 4-7. They are what they are. But I think we all know that they are probably better than their record shows, even though that does not matter at all whatsoever, because they have continuously beat themselves week after week after week after week. And if that is a trend that continues, then a lot of the things that Daniel mentioned about the head coach, about changes, those things need to happen. You cannot have a year where you beat yourself, where you waste some of the arguably potentially could be the best years of several players' career on your team at important positions. You cannot waste that because you can continue to find ways to lose football games. You continue to let other things get in the way of those players winning football games. You have to figure it out. And if they don't, things need to change. And I don't really think there's much else to say to that for me.
My expectation right now for this team, this team that we've got right now, you've got one game left. That's it right now. You've got one game left in front of you right now, because if you lose that game, you're done. I saw someone asking if they had to win out to make the playoffs. Not necessarily, but you do have to win every AFC game. The only one you can really drop is the NFC against the Cowboys. You're 2-5 against AFC teams this season. Can't be that bad. You can't be losing all the division games over and over again. You put yourself in this position to where now you have to beat the Steelers twice. That is incredibly tough to do. And that's before you talk about that you got to beat the Titans, who just took care of the Texans and look like they've actually figured a thing or two out in the last 3-4 weeks. You have teams that we did not expect to be as good as they are. The Broncos are moving the right direction. The Dolphins are moving the right direction. The Colts are moving the right direction. The Bengals are stagnant. They have to change. This is the only chance you get. There's no more putting it off. There's no more saying, it's okay, we still believe we can be a good... No, none of that shit. This is it. This is the last game. Because if you lose this game, and the reason I say this is the only game that this team has that you need to worry about. Don't fucking look into next week or 2 weeks or worry about the score of whatever other game, because all that matters right now is you playing the Steelers. But if you lose this game, you're not playing with this same team, because guess what? Coaches might be let go. Whether that's defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, scapegoats, position coaches, whatever it is, something might have to change. And I'll tell you what will definitely change is young players will start moving in. Starters are going to get benched. There are going to be changes as you start to flip into evaluation mode, because your season will be over. Orlando Brown Jr. probably shouldn't play the rest of the season because he's been dealing with this injury off and on for the last God knows how many weeks. You don't want to risk your future because of that. And you need to do better than what you did last year when you just said, yeah, we could play Charlie Jones, but let's just wait until the literal last game of the season to give him more than 5 snaps in a game. You can't fucking do that stuff. You can't, because you got to figure out what you have right now between Miles Murphy and Joseph Osai and Tyson Anderson and Jordan Battle and Jermaine Burton and Charlie Jones and Andrea. And guess what? Even if you like him, even if you feel good about him, you want to keep him around, they still need reps. Yeah. They still need opportunities. They still need to go out there and just actually do it. And that's why it's going to be a completely different approach, a different team, a different everything going forward if you can't lose, if you can't win this game, because if you lose, you're done. Like that's it. Again, everyone you're competing with is looking good right now. And now you got to beat the Broncos. You got to beat the Titans. You got to beat the Steelers twice. You got to beat the Browns again. Like 3 division opponents. You got to take care of business. That's as hard as it gets, man. So I'm interested, but I'm not worried about any of those other games right now. I'm not worried about playoff percentages and everyone who has to win that game and that week. No, win what's in front of you right now. That's all that matters.
Well, I mean, I think Joe shares the same sentiment based on his comments today during his press conference, which has everybody up in arms. Essentially, where he talked about how we can't focus on the big picture because the big picture doesn't look all too great. Just got to essentially focus on what's in front of us and try to win some games here. This is the reality of it, is the Bengals put themselves in this hole. Yep. No one should be parading around here thinking that anybody's job is safe. And the fact of the matter is this season was abysmal. It has been a letdown to this point. Can it be turned around? Sure. Not here to predict one thing or the other, but I will tell you that the optics don't look amazing for a team that had everything, supposedly everything, that they needed to really put out a competitive roster. And I think that somehow we're supposed to hang hope on for a round pick and Josh Newton at cornerback to be our savior. And I think a lot of people are having a little bit unrealistic expectations for what that guy could be. Could he go out there and play his ass off? 100%. But I just think that if he was as good as we thought, or we had hoped, maybe he would have saw the field a lot sooner. Maybe he would have saw the field a lot sooner. And I don't think that's the wrong thing to say. I think that's the honest thing. That's an honest assessment. If you're sitting here thinking that, oh yeah, Josh Newton is going to come in here and be just in this elite Pro Bowl player that people were saying Cam Taylor-Britt was ready to take this next step, I think that's just foolish. I do think that he can provide a little bit level of consistency. I do think that is a guy that is focused on the task at hand, and that's playing cornerback in the NFL. But I'm not going to sell you guys fool's gold. Neither of them am I saying any of my co-star exactly, but I just don't believe this notion that, I see a lot of people be a little unrealistic when it comes to Josh Newton, what he can potentially bring. You still got Cam Taylor-Britt playing on the opposite side, and that's been a problem all year. Whatever that might look like, or whatever the reasons are to that, you're kind of just hanging your hat on trying to take something from it, if you will. I think the expectation for the rest of the way for the coming off of the bye week is you're hoping to establish some type of consistency, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think the main thing that we always talk about: getting more pressure on the quarterback, being able to cover on the back end. But if you're able to get more pressure on the quarterback, it makes life easier on the back end. It's really just that simple, which brings us to our next point: key ingredients to turn the Bengals season around. I don't know if I can point to, for the first time, you guys know I like to talk a lot. I don't know if I can really point to one thing that I said that I can confidently say turns the Bengals season around. I don't know if I can point to one.
What would be the spark?
Shit, a win.
Well, yeah, no, I'm saying, like, what's the spark to get you there? What's the point? Yeah. What's the thing that gets you? And dude, you talked about this. You brought up Joe Mixon earlier. I see some people saying the sentiment that, like, he was the leader of the locker room, which, like, yeah, he absolutely was the rah-rah leader on the sidelines. Yeah, 100%. Does that make them not miss tackles? Does that make Evan McPherson not miss field goals? Does that make Zach Taylor throw the ball past the sticks on 4th and short or 3rd and short? No. Like, does it make everybody maybe feel a little bit better or believe a little bit more? Like, yeah, sure. But at the same time, does Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, are they not leading by example?
Yeah.
Putting the fucking team on their back, going out there, do it. What about Logan Wilson and Trey Hendrickson and all these other veterans like Von Bell? Wasn't the whole point of Von Bell coming back so he's supposed to know this and be a leader in the locker? Like, what? We're sitting there going, God, if they just had a leader, they're supposed to have fucking 8 leaders all over the goddamn place. And how about the coaches? How about they be leaders? Like, that's I
touch on that a little more. Touch on that part right there a little more, actually.
That's, dude, like, I get so sick of this, like, oh, if they just had more player leadership, if they just had the leadership of Jesse Bates or the leadership of DJ Reader or the leadership of Joe Mixon. And it makes me fucking sick because I'm just like, Was the leadership of Logan Wilson not
yeah,
good? Is the
yeah,
leadership of
yeah.
Trey Hendrickson not good?
Yeah.
Is the leadership of Joe Burrow and
Mhm.
Jamar Chase? Joe Burrow out there busting his ass, gets an off day, and he's out there fucking punting footballs. Like, he's not off and fucking doing a whole bunch of other shit. He's at the fucking facility still doing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so what? Going out there playing his ass off, getting hit and still getting back up and throwing for 400 yards and fucking X amount of touchdowns. Like, what more leadership do you need that's going to make you want to fucking tackle the guy, Tylan Wallace, going down the sideline? What is Joe Mixon going to say to you, or Jesse Bates going to say to you, or DJ Reader going to look at you and say that's going to make you want to fucking win more than you already want to? That's where I'm like, is there a magic phrase that these three guys have that Zach Taylor just doesn't know? Is it some combination of words that Logan Wilson and Von Bell was here for all that? You tell me Von Bell doesn't know what Joe Mixon would say in that situation? Like, why does it have to matter if it comes from one of those three guys? You got to have leaders after. Daniel talked earlier about how this is a different team that made the Super Bowl run, because iterations of NFL teams usually last 2 to 3 years because the average contract length is about 2 to 3 years. The average NFL career lifespan is about 3 years for most guys. When you have that much turnover in 2 to 3 years, you have different guys all the time. You can't just fall to fucking pieces because one veteran left. These guys are going to quickly. That was 4 and 5 years ago. These guys are now going to be 29, 30, and 31. You can't keep bringing them back just because 4 years ago they've been a good leader for you. Someone else has to step up and be that leader. It was supposed to be Von Bell. It's supposed to be Logan Wilson. It's supposed to be Jermaine Pratt. It's supposed to be these guys who got these second contracts, who got the big money to be that leadership. And if they can't be that, then the coaches have to step up and do it. And I just haven't seen that, man.
Yeah. That last part is everything for it, because
Hold before you
go.
Yo, give me some.
The leadership shit is driving me nuts,
seen
man.
you drop this many F-bombs on a show. And I'm
It's been a
sorry for the
day.
kids
It's
out
been
there
a-
that are
been a
listening.
day.
I'm sorry to the parents that are out there listening, the families that are gathered around a television listening to State of the Jungle. But this speaks to where we are with the thing. And I just want listen, Logan, I know you're about to go.
No, you're good.
I just want to say that, hey, you did what I didn't have to do today. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Go ahead.
Got to pass the baton a little bit
Yeah, man.
sometimes. Yeah.
No, but I was just going to talk about, because, at the end of the day, I think most people, and I truly believe that a player-led team will always be better than a coach-led team. I think that's just how it is. But the issue with that becomes exactly what Evan talked about at the end. Yes, I believe that the player-led team will be better than a coach-led team, but the coach has to be there to step up when somebody's not doing. They have to still be a coach. They still have to provide something. They still have to be able to step up when it's needed. They still have to be able to, maybe poke players in the leadership direction. They have to be able to, continue to just lead in other ways. Yes, we want the players to do this. Yes, we want the players to do that. We want them to be leaders. We want them to speak up. We want them to do other things. But if they're not being constantly reminded or empowered or anything from their coach, that's going to be the issue too. It just feels like nobody is really stepping up. Nobody's really everybody's kind of just looking around, and, that's when the coach needs to step up. They need to step up. And, if they have to light the fire under the team, a player, whatever it is, it just feels like everybody's kind of just like looking around and nobody's really stepping up. And again, players will always hold the power in the league, but you're going to look at your coach when times are in trouble. That's what you're always going to look to, because if you're frustrated, you're the one who's supposed to have all the answers for us. And if you continue to be looked at and not have that, that's when issues are going to continue to occur. And I kind of think that's what's going on here. I don't know if Zach just got accustomed to, relying on these players or relying on Joe Mixon and all these guys. Maybe that's what happened. So maybe he's trying to figure it out. But regardless, you can't be in your 5th year, 6th year, 7th year. Now all of your other players are gone. You're like, oh shit, and what do I got to do? Like, I can't, now I have to coach. No, you have to be able to know when it's time to turn it up a little bit. And I think that's just what he's not doing right now. And I think that's kind of, I don't say the root of a lot of the problems, but I think that's not helping the problem be solved either.
And Logan, you're a coach, so you tell me, man, because obviously, like, if you have a leader on your team, you have one of those seniors who's just been playing for 4 years, who everybody gravitates to, who just knows how to get the guys out of a funk when they're in their own head, right? Everybody had one of those guys on their team. If he graduates, are you just like, shit, hopefully we get somebody who transfers in or becomes a freshman? Or do you go up to one of the juniors and you go, hey, man, this is your team now. Like, this is you, and you're going to have to step up, and I'm going to be there for you. I'll be there to help you.
Yeah.
Like you need questions, you need guidance. I can help you.
Yeah.
Like I want to, like you said, empower you to be that leader.
Yeah.
But you can't just sit back and fucking hope.
Yeah, you cannot just expect. You can't expect somebody to become a leader.
We need a fuck bomb counter going around.
I
here
just
right
crazy.
now.
Like, you just can't.
I feel away right now.
It's nice, but yeah, to answer your question, you just can't expect somebody to become a leader. I can want you to be an all-pro receiver, the best leader, the best friend in the world, but
Right.
sometimes that's just not how people are. You know, like I can want my underclassmen to be just this rah guy that's going to take over, but that's not always who they are.
That's not
Everybody's
Geno
gonna
Atkins
lead,
or AJ
Yeah.
Green, right?
but they're
Yeah.
going to lead differently. They're going to lead on the field. They're going to lead in their work ethic. There's just, you have to find your leadership style. And yes, there's so much importance in having a guy that's just going to yell and scream and do all these things, but that's not everybody. And just being able to have the different styles covered, and the coach is supposed to be there, in my opinion, to pick up to where the players aren't. You know, if they're not being this aggressive, this yelling, this hyper guy, that's where you need to fill in. If they're not being the, you know, the confidence booster, you got this guy, that's where you need to fill in. But you can't just be expecting somebody to do all of it, or you can't be expected to do all of it either. It is a team at the end of the day, and that also the team also applies, the teamwork applies in the leadership aspect of things too. It's not just going to be the coaches. It's not just going to be players. At the end of the day, you always are going to have a flow and a marriage of everything. And if that's not happening, you're going to notice it pretty quick. And I think we're starting to notice it.
I agree. Well, y'all said a lot there. Y'all said a lot there. You said a lot, so I don't have to necessarily say it, but I'll say, I think when we talk about the leadership aspect, and that's something I want to touch on a little bit more. We've kind of danced around the idea a little bit, but I'll keep saying this. I feel like the temperature in the city right now, and from folks that I talk to, there doesn't seem to be this overlying confidence that Zach Taylor can turn this thing around. And I'm not just talking about for the remainder of the season. I'm talking about for next season. What has he done, right, respectfully, that would garner more time, I would say, to prove that he can turn this thing around? He has a losing record as a head coach, right? No matter which way we slice it, this year has been a failure. And I think that's the thing.
Playoffs.
Even if you make the playoffs, the expectation were much higher. Now, if you make the playoffs, all is forgiven because it's like, damn, okay, at least you bounce back. It was a shit year, but you bounce back. But let's say if they do miss the playoffs, can we all agree that this year has been a failure?
Absolutely.
So for me, it's like, how can you get a roster? How can you get the fans back on board and believing that this coach can turn it around with a healthy Joe Burrow? Someone sell me on that. Daniel, someone sell me on that to some degree, because I just don't see it. I think like genuinely speaking, I have a hard time seeing how this ship can be turned around.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I wish I could sell you on it, Malik. I really do, man. Listen, I don't think that, and you go look at, there's been many instances of coaches that have done more than what Zach Taylor did and have gotten fired quicker. Obviously, the easy one is Doug Peterson, right? Won a Super Bowl. I believe it was 2 years later, got the can, and he won. So
with a backup quarterback.
So I think that the notion that, and I understand Bengals fans, and Malik, the same thing you said, there's a lot of Bengals fans that feel like no matter what happens, Zach Taylor won't be gone. And that shouldn't be the thought process with any fan base, right? Because that's saying, hey, even if they go lose 3 more games and they end up 7-10, Zach Taylor is going to be here no matter what. And that is a completely false sense. And that should not be how you're looking at this. This is something Zach Taylor, I believe, has helped this culture get from the ground up. But at this point, you are a Super Bowl team, caliber team, and there should not be, and the same thing goes for all the coaches on the coaching staff, right? Because we talked about this. If Zach's gone, it likely is his staff is likely gone as well. So all these guys should feel the pressure. And I'm sorry, you got this team, and the fact that this is on the national stage at this point. Everybody's talking about Burrow. Everybody's talking about Jamar Chase. So if everybody else sees it, Malik, I'm sorry, there is nothing that can shy me away from saving Zach Taylor's job if they don't make the playoffs.
I've seen Mahomes and the Chiefs make playoffs with terrible defenses. To me, this notion out there that, it just, he's here for good. I'll put it this way. I think missing the playoffs with Joe Burrow on your roster is egregious.
Yeah.
Simple.
I think missing the playoffs with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase on your roster is egregious. I think missing the playoffs with a double digit with the NFL sack leader on your roster is egregious. That's what I think. I could be wrong in saying that, but I just think that when you have those ingredients, it's and MJ's in the comment section. We have a Zach Taylor truther in the comment section. He says Zach Taylor deserves to stay our head coach. Super Bowl appearance, back-to-back AFC Championship game, 5-2 in the playoffs. Marvin was 0-7 but you're judging Zach Taylor off of basing him off of Marvin Lewis. You're basing him off of Marvin Lewis. Some coaches can but again, we talk about he brought us to a Super Bowl. We went to the AFC Championship game.
He was here when we went to.
He was here. Yeah, he was here.
He was definitely.
Yes.
Look, I don't want to. Okay,
I want to.
I was about to jump into this because I was about to say, when you hear from the Zach Taylor staunch defenders, right? Most people kind of land in the middle of like, hey, he's got some blame, but not everything's his fault, right?
Yeah.
And that's completely fair. The issue I have is when people go, he took us to the Super Bowl. We made it to the Super Bowl because of him. The culture, he did a good job turning the culture around in those first couple of years, 100%. Give him credit there. As a game manager, he was not very great.
It's still not.
And early, and remember, it took, even after the 49ers game, he was like, man, I took the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands. He was taking the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands and not relying on him in that season. And when they got there, was it because of a beautifully schemed offense that was constantly creating open opportunities for Joe Burrow? No. It was Joe Burrow, Superman, run around, make defenders miss, fuck it, Jamar Chase is down there somewhere ball. Like, that was how they got there. They got there from big plays made by their big players, taking slants and screens and everything else down to the house, or Joe Burrow dancing behind an offensive line that could barely function. So it wasn't, hey, like, wow, yeah, this offensive design is really good. We talked about how it wasn't for the first couple of years, to where they had to find their identity in a lot of different ways as they tried to figure things out. So let's not, okay, yes, he was on the team when the Super Bowl made it there, but like, if Jim Turner was on the keep Jim Turner, he's a Super Bowl offensive line coach, right? It's fucking stupid. Yeah. Like, that's a really dumb reason. Give me the good reasons for Zach, not just he was on the team when they made the Super Bowl. And the other thing that you'll hear from people is, well, the offense is scoring 20 points, 25 points, 30 points a game. How can that be a problem? It must not be Zach Taylor, right? We think about context of situations in every other aspect of our fucking lives, right? When you're driving a car and you have problems accelerating on the highway, or you going, well, it took me 15 seconds, but I got to 70 finally, so I hit 70. I'm doing fine. My car's okay, right? No, you can use your brain to examine what happened between 0 and 70, or 0 and 30 in this case, and go, hey, that was lucky. That's not sustainable. That was Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase doing something. It was not incredible offensive scheme, right? We can use our brains in that same way when it comes to football. So just saying they hit this magic number so everything is fine is not the case. We've seen the lack of aggression. We've seen the lack of aggression with intent and purpose. We've seen the lack of motion with purpose. We've seen the lack of play action. We've seen the lack of easy buttons. It's been years of this stuff. So when you sit here and say, oh, they hit this magic number, well, Joe Burrow's playing like the goddamn best quarterback in the NFL. He's got to be the best quarterback of the decade now if we want to win. That's the level we're putting on.
You know, the thing that comes to me when people talk about, oh, we should keep Zach because of this and the third. It's like, oh, well, we should keep Zach because we went to an AFC Championship with him. We should keep Zach because we went to Super Bowl with him. Well, what if you move off of that guy and the next guy you hire actually win you a championship? Could you imagine if the Broncos said, we should keep John Fox because John Fox took us to the Super Bowl? We don't want to see what life without John Fox, see what life without John Fox looks like. They moved off of John Fox. And they won a Super Bowl the very next year with Gary Kubiak. For me, it's very simple to me. I have always felt like, when the Bengals hired Zach, Taylor, they were in a spot in which the team was faltering. They needed a new voice. They needed a new change. They wanted to go younger. A lot of people was poaching from the McVay coaching tree. And they hired a guy that they felt, and I quote Mike Brown's words, turn into a really good football coach for them. And I quote Mike Brown's letter to the Bengals, we may have hired him a year or two early, but we believe that will basically turn out on the right side of things for hiring the guy. Fast forward, was it a good decision? At the time, it was definitely a good decision. But has Zach Taylor progressed enough for the Bengals to feel like he could be their lead guy going forward? I don't know. I look at the players' faces on the locker room. Yeah. I look at how dejected Joe Burrow looks. And Joe's never going to be that guy that's going to come out and speak against a Zach Taylor. He's never going to be that guy. He's the ultimate team player. He's the ultimate team spokesperson. But you got to be able to read the tea leaves. If Evan, Jimmy, or Daniel jumped up on the show and they said, well, yeah, we like doing the show. Sure. It's fine. It's okay. It's great. Oh, what do you guys think about, you guys become the best Bengals? Well, it's fine. Maybe if we had, some different things were different, maybe if Evan was in the lead or maybe Logan was in the lead, maybe things look a little different without saying exactly what's on their mind. Does that mean that they believe in me? No, that doesn't mean that. And the same could be said for a Zach Taylor. I think it's very obvious here. I think a team definitely embodies their head coach at points in time. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you embody a culture of being scared, if you embody a culture of not being the brightest when it comes to X's and O's, not holding players accountable, what does that say about you? I want to tell you one thing too, Evan. I won't jump into too much here, but what I will say is there's been a growing concern about the respect that Zach Taylor has within the Bengals locker room, is what I'll say. There has been speculations of him getting into it with players and stuff like that outside of the football game days. This is things that I've been told.
And honestly, that leads me to the point of, again, man, if we're not saying, hey, the offensive scheme is just brilliant, you're doing Kyle Shanahan things where, hey, Brandon Ayuk's out and we have Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, and it doesn't matter because we're going to scheme them open. And you can give me whatever offensive line because I got guys who fit my scheme and it's going to work and everything's going to be great. If that's not the offensive caller you are when you're hired to be that offensive coach, okay, well, at least you're the good culture guy, right? Look me in the fucking eyes right now, guys. I see people saying, hey, firing coaches doesn't fix things. You're right, but neither does staying the same when everything seems to be stagnant. When you have slow starts every single year, when you have the same problems every single year, you got to keep relearning the same lessons. And now you don't have the culture. Look at the leaders in the locker room. Look at Jamar Chase. Look at Joe Burrow. Tell me the culture is fine. So if you don't have the offensive scheme, you don't have the culture, what are you doing here? I know that, we get fired automatically. You go back to the Bengals dark ages. No, you fucking don't. That is such a scared fucking mentality that, if we make a change, things might not work out. You're right. Sometimes you hire the wrong head coach. Sometimes you move on to the wrong quarterback. Sometimes you do those things. And guess what? That's not an excuse to never fucking try again in your life because things didn't work out. Like, yes, but sitting around and just hoping things get better is not going to make anybody feel better. Just saying everything is okay is not going to make anything better.
Why are you so scared to change, potentially? To me, I think there should be something said. You could not win with a healthy Joe Burrow, with the Jamar Chase, with the last
number one quarterback, Joe Burrow, Higgins,
with the leading sack leader. I mean, there's so much stuff to point to. Everyone's so scared of, we're going to head back into the dark age.
This is not 20 years ago. This is not when you have small markets that literally can't compete because you can't get exposure anywhere. Social media, all the different things that people do now, Instagram, Twitch, everything else, like you are so accessible. Think about the biggest stars in the NBA. Giannis, Anthony, Edwards. What big giant markets are they in? Milwaukee and Minnesota? Right. Like, it doesn't matter.
I have a question. Why are we loyal to a coach, but not loyal to the elite? We've never had a player like Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase come through this.
What about being loyal to the 50 guys on the roster who are playing? What about being loyal to the fans? What about being loyal to the people who in the organization?
Do you know how many coaches are probably looking at us saying, I could do wonders with that Bengals roster?
How many coaches get 5 years?
This is crazy.
Mhm.
And it's crazy because the fan base has embodied, not everybody in the fan base, but there's a section in the fan base that has adopted this mentality of a city that things will just never improve, or it's always doom and gloom. And that sucks. That's not a good place to be. Y'all should want more. Listen, I'm a person where I can't settle in life. And I'm not saying you guys are, or those of you who are commenting are, but you should never be in a place where you feel like you need to settle. You're so scared of change. Sometimes change is the best thing that could happen.
Remember that one time for that one team, it didn't work out?
Mhm.
Gosh, yeah, we
Yeah.
shouldn't try.
Right.
We shouldn't even try. Don't bother.
And-
Yeah. Go ahead. Daniel.
And I think the issue is, and this is hopefully when you look at, there's two thought processes when it comes to this. First off, when we're talking to the people in the chat that are saying, Zach Taylor, deserves to be here. My thought process is, how does this team look without Zach Taylor this season? Could they have been any worse without Zach Taylor? And my answer is no. I don't think there's a single, and this is my opinion, I don't think there's a single head coach that replaces Zach Taylor this season
Mhm.
and they are not 4-7 or better. And that's where my mind goes to.
And the Betsy Bootcamp, I'm speaking to MJ and I'm speaking to the Ohio 513 right now. That is who I'm referring to. I want to make sure I'm absolutely 100% clear. The fact of the matter is, you guys can let me know why Zach Taylor should stay as the Bengals head coach when the Bengals under Zach Taylor has profusely, year after year, had slow starts, have been out-coached, right, in games that we say that they should win. The slow starts at some point it becomes a part of your DNA. Losing to Gerard Mayo year one, man, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Lack
I
of
think
aggressiveness on fourth down. You have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and you are the literal least aggressive team on 3rd and 4th down since you've had the two of them. That is absurd. You should feel so much more confident than the teams with Daniel Jones at quarterback and no wide receivers that you're even competing with those teams.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you got to be the number one most aggressive team, but you can't be dead last.
Right.
And guess what? When you change the win probability filter to like, hey, you have a 20-25% chance to win this game, you have to start throwing the ball. He goes for it less. The Patriots game, 4th and 5, dude, like your defense isn't tackling. You got 14 missed tackles on the day. You telling me you're trusting your defense? Like, trust your offense, the engine of your team, your superstar quarterback, your superstar wide receiver. Like, you went and got Mike Gesicki. You got Eric All. You have all these wide receivers. We talked all offseason about the blow up of Andre Yoshivas, and you're just going to punt it away? And that's not only that. The Eagles game, when they first played, and they just both kept punting until they both tied. That's a scared mentality. Dan Campbell was up 40 on the Jaguars, and you know what he did? It was 4th and 2 in the freaking red zone, and he went for it. Because he's doing it on a matter of principle. Not just saying you need to go for it on any 4th down, but go for 4th downs when it makes sense because you have a reason.
Somebody asked in the comment section, why did Marvin Lewis stay so long? Elise asked the question, and I'll be very clear with you about it because Marvin Lewis was the first coach that Mike Brown hired that he had success with. They formed an incredible bond, and it took Marvin Lewis years to gain the autonomy that he gained here in Cincinnati. He was the first coach that Mike Brown actually genuinely trusted, allowed for ideas. He almost became like family to Mike Brown. That's why it was so hard to part away. He became one of the more successful coaches in Bengals history. He brought the Bengals out of the dark age. Remember, the 90s were horrible for the Bengals. So when things are so bad, when things are so horrible, right, and you get a guy that's coming in here that brings in about change, the players like him, he's respected around the league, he starts to change the face of the Bengals image, you're going to be a little bit hard pressed to move off of that guy because it's like, oh, I'm so scared. Remember, since he took over his father's team, Marvin Lewis was the best coach that he had in here.
The circumstances of the team were so different when he took over.
Different.
Like just your image from the league, everything. Like you are in such a different place right now. You are a location coaches want to play. You are a place where players want to play with players who they want to play with. You don't have all of those negative things where it's like, gosh, if we don't have a head coach who can get us to Jeff Fisher numbers every single year and make us feel good about kind of trying to compete,
right?
Sort of.
I want to be very clear what Evan's saying too. The reason why Cincinnati is a hotbed destination is because of people like Joe Burrow and like Jamar Chase, what we are advocating for, we don't just want to see people get fired. We are saying before you lose those guys and you have to reset everything all over again, you owe it to yourself to leave no stone unturned. Don't be tied to a coach that seems to get in his own way, and it's then hampering the team. Because guess what? There's going to come a time and day where Joe Burrow is going to retire or leave or want to go somewhere else, and Jamar Chase is going to want to retire or leave or go somewhere else, and you're going to be like, shit, we couldn't win with those guys.
Yes.
The only thing we are saying right now is the reason why Cincinnati is a hotbed destination is because of those guys. So you owe it to those guys to try to bring a championship to Cincinnati, because Cincinnati is a spot where people actually want to be now. I promise you, I think Cincinnati would be the number one job open right now if it came open.
Yep.
If they moved on from Zach Taylor, it would be a job where people would want to go to. It would be.
Yeah. And that's, I think you hit the nail on the head. How often are you in a position? Super Bowl windows aren't often very long. And that's the thing. When you look at so many teams, it is very rare, first off, that you make a Super Bowl. How rare is it that, first off, you hit on a number one overall pick, right? This isn't just a quarterback. Look at every other team, right? Kyler Murray's of the world. There's so many other number one overall picks that didn't have serious success. Joe Burrow is playing like the best quarterback in the NFL. And I think that's the important thing. We can't take this for granted, and the front office can't. So that's where also my mind, while we are blaming Zach Taylor, I think we are right. If we're talking about it too, this also should be blamed at the front office, right? It's not Zach Taylor's job to fire himself, right? And it's also the front office's job to say, hey, if this isn't working and we're all discussing a potential, hey, maybe Zach's gone after this year, why is somebody from the front office saying, hey, trying to help him out, say, hey, Zach, maybe give up play calling duties now? Because that would be my concern. Now,
but is it play call? That's my thing.
No.
I just know there are people out there that are saying, "Oh, Zach Taylor should give up play calling." It's like,
but you should at least try that first, I think.
But that's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is situational coaching. It's poor.
It's game management. It's poor situational management.
And maybe that would help you focus more on the overall, the overall
I would at least
success of it. But my issue is not offense right now. The issue is the overall temperature. It seems like you have a lack of trust when it comes to. It seems to give a lack of trust when it comes to the players. The players are on a spot where they are losing confidence in you. It's not an offensive play calling thing. So it's like, no, I don't want to hire the next sexy, young, offensive-minded coach. I don't care for that shit. I want an established leader in here, somebody who has experience, that knows what the fuck they're doing, that could bring about change to Cincinnati. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in bringing another offensive-minded coach, because that's not going to change. That's not going to bring about the change, the wholesale change we need. Because when you bring in a young coach, there's still that overall sentiment is, okay, he needs to mature. He needs to grow as a in-game manager, as a situational coach. There's so much that goes involved that's involved with becoming a head coach, that me personally, I would like a guy that has experience, or maybe he was a very good assistant coach, coordinator, and has proven he could do it. You know what? There's a guy that we talked about on the Sit Down Morning Show, Daniel, that I'll be honest with you, I thought he was going to be a head coach years ago. He left. He went to Georgia. He proved himself at Georgia. He came back to the Ravens. He's done great with the Ravens. Todd Monken is a guy that you want a
multiple different schemes too.
Multiple different schemes. He's
style,
respected around the league, and he's a veteran guy who's been around the block and who's worked with several coaches. This is a guy to me that I think he makes a lot of sense if you're trying to go with that offensive route. But I think there's a lot of different guys.
There's a lot of coaches.
There's the Belichick. There's the Vrabel. There's so many different guys you could choose from. Is a Vrabel a guy that I would want? Not necessarily, but personally, I think that there's a lot of guys that would do a better job than Zach Taylor.
Yeah,
that's just my thoughts.
I think the thing about the whole coaching and who can be the coach, there's not many times where the head coaching opening would be open on a team like the Bengals are. You're not ever going to have an opening with this much talent on offense, with the high level talent they have on the team. So it's like, it's different than a typical coaching cycle. You know what you have, you know what you need. You can truly find, it's easy. I don't want to say it's easier, but it almost feels easier to find a perfect fit when you already know what we have, what we need, opposed to, we're going to draft a quarterback, we're going to bring in a coach at the same time, like people tend to do. Yes, that stuff works out sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't, but you know what you have right now. You know what you need. You know so much more information about what you are missing in your team and in your organization that should make finding the right head coach for you so much easier. And maybe that means it's a young guy. Maybe that means it's an old guy. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, you should have enough and even more information than you normally have when looking for a coach, which is even more reason to potentially move on. Yes, Marvin Lewis had so much time. It got to a point where it felt like we couldn't necessarily hit the next level. Zach Taylor came in, took us to that next level. Now it's starting to feel like a point where we're not going to be able to get to that next level. So what can we do to get to that next level? That should be what it's all about. I don't feel like there's a more obvious time to do it when things are just feeling so awkward and just stagnant. There's nothing like, I don't think everything that's gone on is Zach Taylor's fault. I don't think anybody up here truly believes Zach Taylor is just the worst, this and that. But it's certainly at a point where it's like, what's the upside?
Are you going to change 15 players on the roster, or are you going to change the coach?
Exactly.
That's easier for the team to do.
The upside of Zach Taylor being here is the biggest, undoubtedly, argument for this question. What the hell is it?
And Logan, I just want to bring up something quick because I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I just want to say this real quick while we have all you people here. Make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. But one coach I really, really want to highlight really quickly is Dan Pitcher.
Yes.
I think the reason why the Bengals offense has taken the next step is because of Dan Pitcher.
Absolutely.
I think Dan Pitcher is open to do ideas. I think Jamar Chase talked about
it's no surprise the motion popped up as soon as Dan Pitcher
and when you
had
turn
more
on the
offense,
film and you watch the Tennessee Titans film, it looked a lot like how the Bengals team looked the last couple of years under Brian Callahan, is what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to say Brian Callahan's a poor coach or any of that kind of stuff like that, but I do think that there has been an updated and offensive philosophy under Dan Pitcher as the Bengals play caller. So me personally, I view Dan Pitcher as an upgrade over Brian Callahan. Yeah, that's just me.
The thing with all that too is, it kind of.
But also, what's the passing game coordinator? I want to give him props as well too.
Crackthorpe?
Radovich. The guy that came from Minnesota.
Yeah.
I also think that him being a part of it has also brought
the only new ideas they've gotten in there.
Yes. Yeah.
100%.
And that's what I want to talk about too. Is we kind of see it on the field. We kind of saw going to the Chargers. Some people aren't available. The defense plays a little bit better. People were forced to leave. Now we're seeing some improvement. So it's just like the couple instances you've had of being forced to change have worked well for you. Like that's the thing. This the lack of adaptation from the current coaching staff. Like I don't want to say he hasn't gotten truly better, but like what has that gotten better at since he's been here? That's like it goes as simple as that. Like,
last two things I want to say on this before we wrap things up on this, because we've obviously been going on it for a while. I know some people are saying, hey, who would want to take this job with the Browns' ownership and dealing with that? And then you got to deal with Duke Tobin, and they're not going to change the front office. What guy wants that? Well, I think, yes, are you maybe not the premium destination as opposed to a New York? Maybe not. But I don't know if you know this, but ownership for other teams is fucking crazy too, especially for New York Jets, for the Panthers. And guess what? They still have managed to get their choice of head coach. And there are only 32 NFL teams and maybe 3 to 5 openings every single year. If you want to be a head coach, you can't really just sit around and wait. You can't. You get 1, maybe 2 opportunities to do the cycle, to do the interviews, to do everything. How quickly did Lou go from head coach candidate doing interviews to not even considered, right? Now that'll never happen. Like, that's what people are saying, right? So I think we need to remind ourselves that, hey, these are very highly coveted jobs that don't come around often for professional sports teams, for one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL, with one of the 5 best wide receivers in the NFL. That's a good start. That's something you can work with. And the other thing I want to say is people are saying, why even bother with the front office or with the coaching change when the front office isn't going to change either? Again, with the why even bother trying to change attitude? First of all, lose it. It sucks. Yeah. Bad attitude to have in life, anything. Second of all, if they are not going to make the changes in terms of drafting players, acquiring free agent talent, building out their pro scouting network so they can be better at attacking free agents that fit their schemes, okay, well, now the importance of hiring a head coach who can be a difference maker for you, either on offense or defense, is all the more important, because you have to be able to squeeze that extra 10% out of the guys that you are given, because that is the margin of victory. And there are guys like Kevin O'Connell, Stefanski, winning games with Jacoby Brissett, looking better than they ever did with Deshaun Watson. There are guys who do this week in, week out, who make their teams look better
Mhm.
and put them in positions to chances to win. Just
Evan.
like you said with Ton Malkin.
Mhm.
You can do that. Brian Flores is reinventing the wheel. Like, give you one of these guys who will make up for the fact that you might not be getting the best talent because of the front office if they're not going to make that change.
I have a quote from a coach, and I brought it up on the show several times, and I just want to reiterate it to y'all if you're tuning in for the first time. There are so many players around the league. Where I came from, we had ourselves, we asked ourselves this question. So many players are around the league, and some guys will go places and do great. Some guys will go other places and not do well.
Mhm.
Don't tell me why a player doesn't work. Tell me why a player does work.
Mhm.
You know who said that? Joe Judge. Do you know where he was referring to, where he learned that from?
Bill Belichick.
Bill Belichick in New England.
Yep.
Don't tell me why a player doesn't work. Tell me why a player does work. And I think truer words have never been spoken regarding that. And I think that goes to what Evan's point is. If you have an organization that's resistant to change, you have to ask yourself the question, well, can said coach get the most out of whoever that player is? Can the coach get, the most out of whatever that player is? And if he can, that can kind of mitigate some of that resistance you get from the front office to a degree. Because you have a coach that can scheme guys open. You have a coach that can get the most out of guys in the pass rush department, in the defensive back. Like there's so many guys that you look at. And one thing I feel like doesn't get a lot of credit, and I know we're not talking about Bill Belichick, but think about how many defensive backs they found, right? Through the years, linebackers they found in New England. They just found talent. And Alice, at least the whole sentiment wasn't Joe Judge. It was more so giving this quote that he
When
gave.
you're talking about player
When
evaluation,
you're talking about
like
player
that's
evaluation.
something that's
Be-
definitely
you
kicked
know,
around scouting circles
yeah.
because it's easy to say that guy can't do
Yes,
this, right?
yes.
It's very easy to look
Yes.
at the film, especially for college tape. You
Yeah.
know, every guy's not a first or second rounder. So as soon as you start hitting that second round, you start getting question marks, right? So you
100%.
start getting more and more question marks. Eventually, you're just like,
Mhm.
well, the guy's undersized and he's not playing strong and blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. And then Bill Belichick would be like, but what can he do?
Right.
What's that niche role that he can have
Yeah.
that I can bring him in for 15, 20 snaps a game, but he's going to
You-
be the best guy at that.
You want to hear the best part too? Somebody put in the comment section. Cold84 says Tobin deserves to be fired, but I think it's more far fetched than the coach being fired. Here's one thing I'll say about that. I don't think Tobin has to get fired necessarily. I think that he's in a role. The Bengals have allowed them put themselves in a situation where they've said, "Hey, the role is director of player personnel." He's just been the guy that they've put out there as the head man that people talk to. He is the de facto GM. So he doesn't have the title necessarily general manager. He's looked at as the general manager in Cincinnati because he's the person as that speaks to he speaks to the media at the combine. He's the person that usually teams are getting on the phone with to facilitate these moves. And at least if your whole reasoning for being on here is just to be a jackass and be right, then this probably ain't the show for you. It's fine. That's the point. You're missing the overall sentiment of what we were saying about the quote, which came from Joe Judge when he was talking about his former boss and how they did things in New England, which, by the way, produced several championships over 20 plus years. That's what we're talking about here. We don't do this show to be right or be wrong. We do this show as a community for us to talk things through. It's not to say I know more than you, or you know more than me, or any of my coaches know more than me, or we know more than you. It's for all of us to talk things through, because guess what? That's why it's called State of the Jungle, because we talk about the overall feeling about the Bengals and we talk things through, and we use this show as a mouthpiece for you guys to sound off, because I know for a fact people within that building listen to this show and they watch this show. And guess what? I sometimes get feedback. Other times I don't get feedback. But one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to sit up here and let someone be a jackass when we're literally trying to talk things through, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the team. All we want is what's best for the team, right? That's why we do this show. We want what's best for the team. We want Bengals fans to feel like their voice is heard. We want you guys to sound off in the comment section. We want you guys to be passionate. And guess what? The tensions are high in Cincinnati right now. Tensions are high amongst the fan base because people want to win. The simple fact of the matter is we're going to keep pushing for change. Cincinnati has never had a show like this. We're going to keep pushing for change. We're going to keep calling a spade a spade. When shit is wrong, we're going to say it's wrong. When things are right, we'll be the first to congratulate them. But let's not use this moment as a chance to essentially run around essentially and be like, "Oh, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong." That's not the base of the show. State of the Jungle, Bengals fans alike, we're all family here. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Logan, you got anything else you want to add?
No, that was great. I love making the point of it, but I mean, at the end of the day, like I said earlier, it's just what are we gonna get out of Zach the rest of the way? Like what are we holding on the hope for? What is, I don't want to say by any means he's been bad or anything, like I said.
But
before,
again,
but it's just
what
what
does
is
he
there to
give
hold
you?
on to?
What does he
Yeah,
give you? It's
like-
culture, and it's, again, watch the interviews.
Yeah.
Watch any of the interviews and tell me everything's all right with the culture in the locker room right now.
And I think that's, I don't want to say that's all there is to say about him, but like at the end of the day,
But again, tell me
he
what he
is
does
what
well,
he
right,
is.
Malik? Tell
Yeah.
me what Zach Taylor does well.
tell me what he can do, not what he can't do, but what did he do?
Yeah.
Like
Again, I would have said culture. I would have said leadership. But right now, I can't say that.
exactly.
And my final analysis on this is we're also still in wait and see. Obviously, this is our discussion now. We've got to see how they come out this week. And that's why I think the analysis, I don't feel any of us are saying Zach should be fired or will be fired after the Steelers.
Yeah,
We're
like
not saying
tomorrow,
that.
today, right now. Like, yeah, it's
This is analysis. I think for the people that are asking themselves the question, should Zach stay or should he go? It's going to be the question. And I think just look at what the players say and ask yourself the question, can this team rebound from a season like this under Zach Taylor? And my answer, I don't think Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, I don't think that they could.
how does running it back just fix any of the issues with this team right now? Because we
There's
talked
no
about
point.
there's so much.
There's
Again,
no
this is
point.
not singularly Zach Taylor's fault.
No.
I'll say it one more time, real nice and slow. This is not only Zach Taylor's fault. Duke Tobin in the front office, absolutely, for player acquisition and drafting and what they've done there, absolutely deserve their blame. The position coaches in terms of development, veterans, draft picks, rookies, everybody has taken a step back. Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, Cordell Volson, Cam Taylor-Britt, no matter where you look, everyone has looked worse. So player development's been bad. Player acquisition's been bad. Execution on the field has been bad. Game management's been bad. So when everything is bad, what do? Because you can't just tear the entire team down to the studs until you have just Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Trey Hendrickson sitting there staring you in the face, and you start rebuilding again with free agents. You can't do that. That's not realistic. So when all of these things desperately need to be changed, letting go of the coach changes everybody in the coaching staff. It changes all of the approach for the players. It changes how they approach practices. It changes their approach to game day. It changes the mentality of the team and what they're preaching and what they're emphasizing. Changes their technique that they're being emphasized. Look, sometimes it's not someone's a bad teacher or a bad student. It's someone has a different learning style or a different teaching style. You see that all the time in school. Like some people are visual learners and people do like doing auditory lessons, right? And that doesn't work for everyone, right? That's the thing is that's your job as a positional coach or as a development of talent to find out the best way that people learn. And right now, these guys are not developing, veterans and draft picks alike.
Right.
And again, if you clean the coaching staff, everything changes to how you manage the game, how you approach scouting, drafting, everything because of the influence coaches have on this team.
I 100% you're agreeing. And Alice, if we had a moment where I misunderstood you, I apologize. She said in the comment section she wasn't sure what she did wrong. I took when you were asking about Joe Judge, essentially, and you said, is he still coaching in the league? Basically, why was I bringing him up, essentially? And then you said, well, I'll take that as a no. That's why I responded how I was responding, because it wasn't about the overall sentiment wasn't about Joe Judge being a coach. It was about the comment he made about what he learned in New England. And that goes to when we bring up the players the Bengals have missed on. We talk about player evaluation. We talk about so many things. So that's where I was coming from. If I misunderstood you, I apologize. Tensions are obviously high right now within Who Dey Nation. The Bengals fans want a winner. It's been a conversation we have literally almost every single day on the show, and how they can kind of get there and how they can kind of uncover those things. I appreciate you for always watching the sport because you're always in the comment section. But somebody asked if Zach Taylor basically was to make the playoffs with the Bengals and they were to lose in the first or second round, does he keep his job? I say yes, he does keep his job, and he would keep his job. Let's be honest, the Bengals would keep him. But let me tell you why. Let me just so I'm clear with everyone. I don't hate Zach Taylor. I think the guy is a great dude.
He may go to another team and be an awesome head coach.
Not likely, but we
have seen
possible.
this, right?
Yeah,
How many times have we seen guys like Wade Phillips, for example, like John Fox, like John Coughlin, like Bill Belichick? How many jobs did he have?
100%.
Right?
100%.
Like that's the thing is like
right.
if you got to be given the right tools and the right circumstance, and all the relationships matter. Yes, and lucky. You got to be a little bit lucky.
The thing that I want to be clear about is I didn't just. If you guys remember, I really waited. I reserved my comments of Zach Taylor, the Bengals should move on from Zach Taylor if they miss the playoffs for a while. I waited. What did it for me was seeing Trey Hendrickson slap his hand down. What did it for me was the Jamar Chase speaking out. What did it for me was the players going at each other on the sideline. To me, that your best players. To me, that is a vote of lack of confidence. That means that the locker room is in shambles. That means that players are frustrated with one another. So for me, when I see that, and let's say if you miss the playoffs, you lose. That means the players have the entire season to sit on that loss. And then they have to somehow get the gumption up to believe in this staff and believe that things can get turned around after they just had an amazing year with Joe Burrow playing elite and they still all missed the playoffs. I think for me, it's more of a, how do you bounce back? How do you bounce back? And it's like you can go off of that in so many different sports, but I believe that there's a fundamental lack of trust with Zach Taylor. If the Bengals wind up, like, let's say they lose against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday, I think that there is I feel like there's some damage done. I think there's some damage done within the locker room and some trust is lost there. And I think once trust is lost between coaches and players, it's very hard to get that back. It's so hard to get that back. And versus seeing the team implode and seeing players ask for trades and doing all this crap, I'd rather see the organization say, hey, you know what? Let's bring in a new lead man. That's what every other functioning organization does around the league. Once trust is lost, once players don't get that voice of confidence anymore. Once Joe Burrow has that smug look on his face and he doesn't seem as enthused, or Jamar Chase says, I don't know, as Zach, or you got players arguing with Zach Taylor throughout the week, whatever the case may be, I think that's when you have to look at it and you have to say, is the situation salvageable? Do me a favor think about it this way. If you have a manager, no matter what your job is, or a boss, and you get into it with the boss, what happens? Ownership or people, whoever's the hierarchy, brings you both in and they try to put together a meeting to facilitate to see if the situation is salvageable. If the situation is not salvageable, what happens? You probably lose your job. You probably do. If you get a bunch of employees going at it with that said boss, they usually look at the situation and then they ask themselves, is the situation salvageable? And if you have multiple employees unhappy, it's much easier to remove a manager or someone in a hierarchy position than remove 5, 6, 7, 8 employees, because then it seems like management doesn't have your back. And that's the way I'm looking at it. Is the situation salvageable in Cincinnati? Can Zach Taylor get Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, all these guys up and ready to go for the next 6 games? I'm going to tell you right now, Zach Taylor's most impressive coaching job in Cincinnati are these next 6 games. If he can get these guys to turn over a new leaf and be up and be excited,
I'll be more impressed than the Jake Brown.
I'd be so impressed because right now morale's down. Right now belief is down.
They look dejected.
They look dejected as hell. And guess what? To me, that does nothing but bleed over into the next season if you keep that guy on the team. At least with Marvin Lewis, you knew, okay, we've seen him do it before. We've seen him. He's got guys believing. Even when he left, there was a lot of players that were unhappy he was let go.
Still had the respect of the locker room.
Exactly. And so when you think about it from that perspective, ask yourself in every situation, is the situation salvageable? If the situation is not salvageable, that's in relationships and friendships and business relationships. If it's not salvageable, it's probably best for both parties to split respectfully.
Mhm.
And I think that's how the Bengals should be looking at it. There is no tie there with Zach. There is no, oh, he's family. It's a business.
Mm-hmm.
You are now paying Joe Burrow elite money. You're going to have to pay Jamar Chase elite money. And now you have to add, now deal with the one caveat is, will Jamar Chase even want to sign back here in Cincinnati under this regime if things are going south? They are winners. They want to win at all costs. The situation, in my opinion, I'll reserve judgment, but from what I've seen, the looks on people's faces that I've seen, I have a hard time seeing God. I'm a leader. I run a company, and I know when a situation is bad. I know when people look dejected, and I also know when it might be time to say, "Hey, it's not fixable. It ain't happening."
Zach Taylor's a really, really good guy. He's also made a lot of money being a head coach in the NFL.
Yes.
Like, he's going to be fine no matter what. Like, he's going to be all right. He's not going to be cold out on the street. He's not going to have problems finding the job. He's pretty well connected throughout the college football and NFL. Like, he can manage somewhere. And again, he may find great success somewhere else. It just, again, it is hard to win in Cincinnati with all the constraints you have between the guaranteed money that you can offer to free agents, between having to acquiesce to the draft whims of ownership and everyone else who might have an opinion, as opposed to, being like John Lynch and having a little bit.
I want to agree with Elise. I know we went at it early, but you're right. She said, we will find out a lot on this Sunday.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
100. If the Bengals lose this game,
oh man,
I don't even know if I'm staying up to State of the Jungle. I don't know if I'm staying up, if I'm going to be on State of the Jungle next week, because I don't know what to say to y'all. At that point, I'll obviously be here. Obviously, I'm being facetious, but I'm just being honest with y'all, man. I genuinely don't know, because just the overall, fun fact, just the mood is just like, everybody just seems like whatever. Like we were out to dinner the other night. Jermaine Pratt walks inside the restaurant we're at, and he even seemed just like he didn't want to be like he didn't want to be out too long. They said, hey, it's gonna be a 10-minute wait, whatever. He left. But for me, there's so much that goes into I think morale is just at a point right now where it's gotta, if you want to have some type of salvageable of a season, you need
some sort of spark.
You gotta win this game, which brings us to the next point.
Ping pong tables?
Why get rid of them in the first place? I mean, I just,
so that you can bring it back and be a genius, Malik.
Right.
Chess, not checkers.
Right.
Chess, not checkers.
Man, let's bring up that conversation, Jimmy, if we can. Okay.
Oh, the ping pong tables.
Let's preview. No, let's preview. Bro, if we ever get to a point where we talk about some damn ping pong tables on the shelf, fire me. I mean, I'm done at that point. Well, I'll fire myself.
Malik, the economy is taking a turn.
Yeah. I this Bengals Steelers game is a game that when I look at it, the Bengals should but we've said that so much. I don't view the Steelers as some juggernaut. But they do the simple things well. And you know who struggles with the simple things? The Bengals. It's I don't know.
I'll just start off real quick. And the part that scares me is exactly what you said. First off, this team, the Steelers, have been absurd with a lot of rest under Mike Tomlin. That is, they're 9-1 with 9+ days rest. So very similar to what we're saying about Cincinnati Bengals being great off of bye. Pittsburgh Steelers are very, very, very good off of bye weeks and off of long rest. This team also, their 3 losses have come by 3 points each, except this past week, I would think against the Browns was 4 points. The only time they lose is close games. The Bengals are going to have to do something this week that they haven't done at all this season and win a damn close game against a good team. And that's just where my thought process is. This is a divisional game as well. And you see all throughout the NFL, divisional games, as we know with the Bengals, are so tough to win. That's just a simple thing. This is going to be a very close game. And that's the part that really, really scares me.
The one thing I'm hanging my hat on is they always look different out of the bye week.
Yeah.
Does that translate to this season? Does that translate to this season? I'm telling you right now, if they lose to the Steelers on Sunday, I could see a world in which they lose to the Cowboys.
Yep.
I could see a world in which they lose to Brian Callahan and the Titans.
Cowboys Cowboys defense showed up.
They showed up.
They did.
I could see a world in which this shit gets bad.
The
And I
Titans
think it
look good
would.
against the
Yeah.
against the
They
Titans are
did.
coming
Texans.
along. Titans are coming
They
along.
did.
The Colts
It's-
look good.
No, Broncos
The
look
Broncos look great. Bo Nix is throwing for like 250
The
yards. I'm
Browns
pretty sure.
look
I was gonna
good.
say,
Yeah,
shit, the
like,
Browns look better than they did.
God bless. Like that's
Listen.
the thing. It's like when we're playing the schedule game back in July and we're going, oh, that's a win, that's a win, and that's a win. And it's like suddenly all those fucking
We haven't
wins.
won
We're-
many of
yeah,
those
right.
games.
Like, yeah, the Patriots game, the Commanders game. Like, thank God they walked away with that Raiders win, or we'd be sitting here fucking despondent looking into the space, just wondering what the hell's going on.
And so Angelo Ray asked a great question. We're going to get to start answering your questions too, because I kind of want to get, it's been a while since we've done that really. You probably asked one of the best questions that I've ever seen someone ask on this show. And I appreciate you for it because I didn't even think of it. Said the Bengals got to the Super Bowl under the coaching of Taylor. What do you guys think happened from then and now? What changed? I think the first thing I could say, they got there with Zach Taylor as the head coach, is what I'll say. I think maybe a little bit of complacency set in. And I don't think from just coaching, I think from the organization. I think that they allowed themselves to believe that the slow starts did not matter because they always felt like they could climb out of the hole.
Yeah.
But what happens when you can't climb out of the hole? Well, it looks like this. Because you could say this about a lot of the seasons that they had slow starts. Well, if they don't climb out of the holes, a lot of seasons could look like this.
Mm-hmm.
They could have looked like this. And I think that's the part that kind of hurts. You got the defense not getting as many turnovers as they once did in years past. And that comes down to the organization and the mismanagement of the roster when it comes to key players. And I'm not going to go dive into it. I feel like we've been talking about older players just as a community at a nauseating pace. But I think what happened was complacency set in within the organization. And they believed we'll win a championship. We'll win a championship. We're not worried. And then slowly but surely you look up. Tyler Boyd's going. Slowly but surely you look up. T. Higgins is going. DJ Reader's going. Well, we just got Joe. We still got Jamar. We still got T. You look up. T. Higgins is in and out of the lineup. Now he's about to be gone. Now the house that you thought was impenetrable. See that, Ev? I got some words.
Okay.
The house that you thought was impenetrable is now starting to crumble right before your very own eyes. And now you're left wondering, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do? Evan, what are your thoughts?
I think if you're talking about the Steelers, like in this upcoming game, like it's got to start with the offense being consistent because the Steelers offense itself has been inconsistent to this point where they've won multiple games with either just a touchdown or just multiple field goals and the defense playing lights out. And God bless, man, TJ Watt and Nick Herbig and Cam Hayward. Like, that's a hell of a defensive line. Keanu Benton in the middle with them. Larry Ogunjobi there as well, kind of rotating in there. So between all that, they have a really, really good defensive line. But fortunately, the strength of the Bengals offense is the passing game, and that matches up pretty well with the Steelers secondary and kind of their lack of consistency and production this year. Joey Porter, 59th out of 73 corners in PFF grade. Dante Jackson, 70th out of 73 corners in PFF grade. Even Minkah Fitzpatrick has had a little bit of a down year by his standards, 26th out of 65 safeties. So you've got some options there that you can attack in the passing game. You've got multiple weapons. You've got one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. You've got one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then you have one of the best edge rushers in the NFL going up against a guy named Dan Moore, who, while Dan Moore is filling in very, very admirably and as a starter for the Steelers, is still just a very average at best tackle this season and ranks 50th out of 55 tackles in pass block efficiency. So you have to take advantage of that matchup. You got to look like you did in the Raiders game. Maybe not 4 sacks great, but you got to be in the backfield. Russ has a really high pressure to sack rate this year. I believe he's 25th out of 29 quarterbacks in pressure to sack rate. So a lot of those pressures are turning into sacks. He's not as mobile as he used to be. He's 20th in QB scrambles too. He sits in the pocket. He holds the ball. He's also 20th in average time to throw. You will have the chance. The interior of their offensive line is not a good pass blocking line. You can take advantage of these guys. BJ Hill, Sheldon Rankins, If you're ever going to have a game, and unfortunately, it looks like Sheldon Rankins may still have illness stuff that he's slowly working through. But whoever's on the interior, whether that's Chris Jenkins or McKinley Jackson or Sam Hubbard kicking inside or Miles Murphy or just whoever it is, you are going to be able to take advantage of this. This is not the Steelers offensive lines of 5 and 6 years ago that we're used to, or the Mike Munchak offensive lines that we're used to. So you can take advantage of that. So if I'm saying, hey, like Bengals, what's your path to victory? It's you beat up on this secondary using play action and quick game to try and slow down the defensive line a little bit. Move the pocket on some of the rollouts occasionally. I know Joe Burrow's not a huge fan, but just 2 or 3 of those to keep the defensive line honest. And then you attack through the air, and then defense, you just try and not give up the big play, because that's what they do is they battering ram you with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. And then they try and throw one over your head to Calvin Austin or to George Pickens. And that's their big plays. And they try and get enough offense out of it.
I'm happy that you brought all that up. One thing that just peaked in my head, man, when you were talking, I keep thinking about when we were doing the War Room episodes, and there was this back and forth we all had regarding should the Bengals draft an edge rusher, and it brings me to the question.
You were big on the Jared Verse train. To your credit, man, he looks awesome.
Thank you, brother. But there was a comment in here asking essentially what, the question was what went wrong, and what popped in my head was I think the Bengals sort of forsake defense a little bit for offense. I really do believe that in a lot of ways. Like for me, I look at it and I say I would have loved to have a Latu or a Jared Verse, or you name whatever, because you knew the defense. Like the defense, what happened is that they kept filling in for the offense whenever they needed an upgrade there or somebody to step in, but they kind of just stepped with the same old guard when it came to the defense, right? There was really no true emphasis put on to upgrading the defense to make it better. And I look at how many names were there, and I say, a Blake Fisher was there for the Bengals in like a second round or whatever the case may be, right? Roger Rosengarten was there later in the draft, and it's like I understand the need for tackle. I've really, really understood the need for tackle, and I've been happy with Mims. Obviously, he has had ups and downs like any rookie does, but he's had a lot of bright spots. But I also look at what would the defense, how much the defense could have been improved with the Jared Verse opposite of Trey Hendrickson. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but I look at it and I say, what went wrong? Why has the defense sputtered? Why has things looked as bad as they have? Because they kept maybe guys around a little bit longer than they should have. Sam Hubbard has been injured, which feels like the majority of 2 seasons. He's offered no life in the pass rush department. Miles Murphy was in and out of the lineup. He was hurt, and he's still a guy that's hopeful for. And it's like, well, you can't draft too many defensive ends because how are you going to get playing time? I look at a team like the Philadelphia Eagles that will literally just draft.
Yes,
will let the board fall to them, and they will draft best player available. They will literally go secondary. They didn't give a freak that they had a guy like Darius Slay. They will keep addressing it because of the worst case scenario.
And they look great.
They look great. And the worst case scenario, if you lose a Cam Sample, you lose a Sam Hubbard, it's not woe is me. Think about it from this perspective. If Trey Hendrickson was out the game, and this is why I want the Bengals front office to start looking from this perspective. If Trey Hendrickson went out of the game, what would be left of your pass rush? That's the conversations that should be happening. It shouldn't be, well, we have Cam Sample. It shouldn't be, well, we believe in the potential of Joseph Asai, or we believe in Miles Murphy. My bad, Max. I thought I'm confused.
He could probably rush passer.
He probably could. But to me, that's where it drops off. 100% Jared Verse, Latu were the best players on the board. Amarius Mims.
I say that as a Amarius Mims fan. Yeah,
yes.
No, that's 100% accurate.
And for me, I would have preferred to have 2 great edge rushers. 2 great edge rushers that would have offset your lack of aggressiveness of addressing the cornerback spot because you believe so much in Dax Hill. I don't think we worry as much about Cam Taylor-Britt if those guys are out there.
No.
Yeah. I don't. And so, like, for me, I sit here and I look at the organization. That's why when people call for Lou's job, it's hard for me to get on board with it. it's hard for me to get on board with it. I understand he does play a role because he is a defensive coordinator, but I can say without a doubt, every coach in that building doesn't get what they want in the draft. Because the head coach is an offensive-minded coach, Zach Taylor, what his wants and needs do take precedent over what some of these other position group coaches might want. And I don't know, man. I look at it and I say, the Bengals have to make a real commitment and a concerted effort to address the defensive spot, no matter who you bring in. No matter if you move on from Lou, no matter if you move on from Zach, you have to address the defensive position. You have to. Sam Hubbard shouldn't be on this roster next year. And I think that's a tough conversation to have. And I understand he's a Cincinnati kid, even though he's almost like 30 years old. We're still calling him that.
But that's the thing,
yeah.
right? Is you got to come to that point where
Yeah.
I talked earlier about, hey, like the average NFL career is,
Yeah.
or even contract is
Yeah.
2.5, 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So like you've been around for 2.5 iterations now
Mhm.
of NFL teams. That's a long time, dude. Like eventually you got to separate, right? Eventually the end has to come somehow. And right now you're sitting there and it's like, hey, he was one of the league's best run defenders for like 4 or 5 straight years. Can't take that from him.
Yeah.
But right now, no, not
Yeah.
that.
The part that I think that the conversation also is just look at premium talent. And that's where I like the people who defend the Mims pick. I'm with you at times. I think regardless, he is going to look good. But look at the premium talent that you've got on one side of the ball. Joe Burrow, top 10 talent. Jamar Chase, top 10 talent. Orlando Brown, top 10 talent. T. Higgins, top 20-ish talent. And then Mims, you could say, is going to be your top 10 talent. That's 5 guys on one side of the ball.
Mhm.
On the defensive side of the ball, you have 1. And that's where maybe some people could argue Logan Wilson, but I think you've got 1 guy.
I think the hope was Cam Taylor-Britt was going to be one of those guys too, but
Yes.
that is, whew,
Yes.
bottoms dropped out on that one.
And that's where I think the issue is,
Mhm.
because you look at even how they addressed it in free agency, albeit they tried, going with the guys that were available, but you went after guys that could plug a hole. And that's where I think it's just as simple as that. The premium talent you have on one side of the ball versus the other is a major problem.
And Danny, I just want to make sure I know we're going to have plenty of episodes to dive into dive into contracts and stuff like that. We're going to, but releasing Geno Stone, I believe, gives you a $1.5 million cap hit.
Sheldon Rankins.
That because they luckily the way the Bengals do their contracts.
This is why, because people ask, why don't they just give them all
Right.
the guaranteed money and push all the chip? Because right now, if you had Sheldon Rankins and you have Geno Stone and they
We'd all
aren't
be
performing
bitching.
well, you didn't give them a lot of guaranteed money in their second year. So now you can cut them
Yeah.
instead of paying them $15 million to not be on the team like you did with Trey Waynes.
Mm-hmm.
Now
And-
you can cut them.
Exactly.
You don't have that
And
problem.
You know, they paid them that money. I think it was like $6 million up front or whatever it was. That's all paid for. It was guaranteed at signing.
Mhm.
It happened.
Yep.
You can move on.
Uh-huh.
And you can rectify that mistake. He'll probably sign back with Baltimore and do great. That's probably what would happen, realistically speaking. Okay, and sure it will be the next, but let this serve as a reminder going forward when you do draft a guy, life isn't always better on the other side of things. So when you do decide to move off of the said players, make sure you actually have a plan in place, because you've now been trying to fix the safety room for 2 seasons. Nick Scott, Geno Stone, and you probably have the opportunity to grab a really, really good free agent at the safety spot. There are some names out there for you potentially. If the biggest thing is communication, and then also you have to make sure the talent matches up. You have guys like Javon Holland, you have guys like Budda Baker who are going to be probably sitting out there and probably going to be the first time really testing the open market. To me, I just think that it has to make sense when you're looking at it, and there needs to be a true effort from everybody within the building, top down. If Lou's the defensive coordinator, which I really hope he is, I'm just going to be honest with you, I really hope he is. If Zach's still here, I really hope Lou is still the defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that they do everything in their power to give the guy what he needs. I really, really believe that, because I think that the difference of a Jared versus a Latu changes the defense considerably.
And the final thing I'll say is the Miles Murphy thing. I think, and this is the issue, and I thought you guys brought it up. That was great. It's a sunk cost fallacy. It's when you feel like you invested in a guy, and you're not going to upgrade
So you
just
can't cut
because.
bait. Yeah.
And that's the philosophy I hope that they don't have, because if that's the philosophy that they went with without or for not taking a verse or Latu, I feel like you're just doing yourself a disservice, because you look at all the great NFL teams, they're the teams that stack up on talent, regardless of who you have, because you can always find a place to play these guys. If you would have drafted a Jared Verse, you can find a place to play him. So I just hope that how they approach this offseason isn't like that.
Well, I could tell you, remember I took defensive end off my board, Daniel, when I were talking, and I told you what I was told.
Yeah.
We got an overabundance at the defensive end position, and it wasn't a position they were going to be considering. And that
goes back to
that was a mistake.
Yeah. What do they say? Every position was on the board except for quarterback in that year that they had Andy Dalton and Pat Mahomes. And it was the same way where having a guy, I like Cam. I'm a Cam Sample fan.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you because you have Cam Sample, you shouldn't draft Jared Verse.
Yeah.
Like that's silly, right? Like that's an objectively, and Daniel's 100% right. Like when you sink resources into something, it can feel nasty and terrible and awful to admit I made a mistake and now I have to eat what I did there. But the sooner you do it, the better it is for you. Because if you sit there and you prolong it and prolong and prolong it, the damage gets worse and the cleanup gets worse. And you sink more and more resources into trying to make that work.
Can I be real with you? If I was a general manager, this might sound a little bad, but I'll tell you, my philosophy personally would be, let's say we drafted a cornerback last year, and there's a very good corner. Let's say if I have a young cornerback that we drafted last year, and we have a very good player at cornerback who is still on the roster. Let's say he has 2 years, a year left on his deal. I'm still drafting that cornerback personally. I don't think that there's any position outside of like special teams, right? Where like I'm like in the first round where I'm genuinely going to be like, I'm taking that guy off my board. Hell, I'll be honest with you. Maybe this is a bad way to look at it as a general manager. I'd be like, let's say if there weren't any amazing talents on the board, but there wasn't a quarterback that was sitting out there. I personally, just to spite, I do one of two things. I put a feelers out there for calls for said quarterback and try to really cash in a pick. Fuck, I might draft the quarterback
if you like him. Like,
I'm serious. Like I would literally draft the hell out of players based on best player available. I don't care what the position is. I don't care what my roster looks like. If you're an elite talent, I'm not going to be like, wow, I have this really great player. I'm not going to draft you. The Eagles could have did that. They drafted Jordan Davis with the thought process that Jordan Davis was going to be great. Then they had the chance to grab his stablemate from Georgia. Yeah. They drafted him. Their interior of their defensive line is nasty, is ruthless. I'm drafting guys. I will draft a position 3 years in a goddamn row if the board tells me that this is the best way to go about it. I'm not
linebacker.
Huh?
Not linebacker.
Oh, no, I'm going to linebacker.
Well, that won't be the best player.
I'm only making a joke just because there was the tweet circling around in draft season where it's like looking at all the the off-ball first-round linebackers who got drafted. Mm-hmm. Basically, you're not defensive ends, right? Yeah. And it's Kenneth Murray, Patrick Queen, Jordan Brooks, Devin Bush, Devin White, Rashawn Evans, Roquan Smith, who has made his way there, Tremaine Edmonds, Jerron Davis, Reuben Foster, Darren Lee, Stephon Anthony, we're bad at evaluating linebackers.
Yes.
Like we inherently, when you've missed that many times, all of those guys did not get re-signed by the team that drafted them. Yeah. They were uninterested in having them. So they are largely considered busts according to draft status by many people. So just jokingly, that is one position.
For sure. Somebody asked about quarterback. And the reason my thought process behind a quarterback is some team is going to have an injury at the quarterback.
You end up with the Sam Bradford scenario, the Carson Wentz and Sam Bradford scenario.
Some team's going to be in a spot where they're like, shit, we're in a bad spot. We need to trade for a quarterback. Well, now give me 2 first-round picks for it. Give me a first and a second.
I'll say quarterback.
That's just maybe quarterback is just a little pushy.
But taking one in the 4th round, absolutely.
I think I'm with you in the sense that, hey, look at last year, right? What would have happened? And that's how I think you should operate as a franchise. You should have a capable backup quarterback. I think in round 3, round 4, in round 5, and this is where it comes to town evaluators. If you evaluate a guy and say, hey, I truly believe with the makeup of this guy, the analysis that we put in, the people that we've talked to, that this dude can be a star quarterback at the NFL level. If you believe in a guy in round 3, round 4, why the hell not? And that's what I think would be fascinating to hear these people's draft discussions, like the Bengals. Like, hey, I feel like with the amount of time that you put into these dudes, you should know, hey, obviously you're going to have misses, but you should know and have a pathway that every single player is going to become a star, or every single player is going to be a very, capable player at their position, or else why the hell are you drafting them?
Yeah.
So
100%. I listen, man, I think sometimes people get in there and they overthink.
Yeah.
I think that people get in there and they overthink, and then you're left with Jackson Carman as a pick. Personally, I don't care if Tevin Jenkins has back issues. I mean, clearly the rest of the league didn't view it as some major huge thing that
People are going to want Tevin Jenkins in free agency this year. So.
I would have drafted him. You can't tell me Tevin Jenkins wasn't better than Jackson Carman. It was just he had really good feet. Oh, okay. And you're taking advice from okay, I'm not going to say that, but yeah, like to me, there needs to be less overthinking throughout the process, because the really good feet, where did it show up at? It didn't show up.
OnlyFans?
Is that what he's doing nowadays?
Oh my God. And on that note, no, but I really do think that the philosophy of best player available needs to ring true. And I think also not settling in free agency and just drafting. If a guy says, hey, I want this defensive end player, well, we're not going to give you that guy that you need, but we are going to give you a guy. Okay, that's not what I asked. Well, we're still giving you somebody. Make it work.
How about Tyler Shelvin? Can you make Tyler Shelvin work?
Like, come on.
Can you make Jordan Willis work?
No.
Guy's stiff as a cardboard cutout, but yeah.
Tyler Shelvin, man.
Like to me, there's so much that there's so much that there's so much wrong. Where I sometimes I feel like the front office and the coaching staff isn't as connected as they portray that they are at points and times.
I know Frank. I know Frank and Zach go at it on the sideline on the headsets on game day. There is a lot of
back and forth, a
lot of colorful expletives exchanged. Yeah,
and so when you look at it from that philosophy, I think that there needs to be an overhaul. I think this is an inward look type of moment for them. And let's say if they don't fire Zach Taylor, because we talked a lot about moving on from Zach Taylor. What if they keep Zach Taylor? There needs to be a true look within themselves as an organization and be like, you know what? How do we move forward? And what is this going to look like? Because if you don't move on from Zach Taylor, I do think organizational changes at the very least need to happen, in my honest opinion. I think those should happen regardless. I think they need to get real serious about who's calling the shots and what this thing is going to look like if they're serious about winning a championship. I do think no matter which way we slice it, we're in for an interesting, entertaining offseason in Cincinnati.
For sure.
And I think that's not talked about enough. I think we're in for I think changes could happen potentially. And I'll keep saying that. But I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of State of the Jungle presented by the Right Way Sports Network. Me and the guys appreciate you guys for spending your Thanksgiving Eve with us. And we hope that all of y'all have an awesome holiday season, awesome Black Friday. Hope that you spend a lot of time with your family, your friends, your loved ones. And we appreciate you guys for supporting. I'm not sure if you guys noticed it, Jimmy. You could put it up too. We finally came out with the Who Day the Right Way shirts. So credit to Gary Jellison, who was the first person to bring that up and saying we should do something like that. We did it very creatively too. We did the Who, we had the logo in the middle, and then it's like Day the Right Way. So if you guys want to purchase those, you can purchase those on the TWSN shop. No pressure, no, none of that. If you like to support the crew, if you want to wear some of the merch that we've got coming out, we've got winter jackets, hats, the whole 9 yards. It's getting cold out there. Yeah, absolutely can. We appreciate y'all for making us a part of your Wednesday routine. We hope that you enjoy the holiday. And until next time, from me, the State of the Jungle crew, my company, TWSN in Bengals Nation, Who Day.